Hi guys, Joe Wolverton, Teacher of Liberty here for you, back with another podcast. First, I want to say thank you so much to those of you who have been ordering my book from Amazon. My book, What Degree of Madness? Madison's Method to Make America States Again. It is the number one new release in the Constitution section of Amazon and the number one new release in the political science section of Amazon. I appreciate you so much. Keep buying that. Keep pushing it up so we can get this word out. I'm so grateful to you. Again, it's What Degree of Madness? Go to Amazon, look that up, and we can just spread this out, and we can get a lot of people on our side helping us to maybe we actually have a chance of rewinding this business and getting us back to a place where we were meant to be. And that's kind of the focus of the podcast today. But first, I want to give a shout out to some of my friends who gave me a belated Christmas present. They know me all too well. My Trump MAGA hat, right? Thank you so much. I want to say I'll treasure it. I don't know if that's the word I should use, to be honest, but I love all the people. They signed it. The students over there signed it. Appreciate you so much. I will keep it. I'll sell it on eBay someday when the people that sign this are famous. I'll sell it on eBay. No one will believe that I actually knew you guys. So let's get started, right? So I'm going to tell you more about the intended structure. Notice I said the constitutional structure of our government tonight in just a few minutes than you will learn in 4 years of high school, 4 years of college combined. I promise you that, because we are going to look at what actually in the Constitution, what it actually meant, okay? We're going to start just with Article 1, literally the first sentence of Article 1. Article 1 talks about Congress, right? The legislative branch. We're going to just read the beginning of that, and you're going to see what the founders meant, what the framers of this document meant, and you're going to see how you can prove that that's what they meant, all right? So why are we starting with Article 1? I guess I'll say that first. Article 1, first of all, it's the beginning, but why did they put the powers of Congress in Article 1? Why wasn't Congress Article 3 or 4 or 5? They put the articles, the first three articles, in order of the power that they intended these branches to possess. Article 1 is Congress because those are the representatives of the people in the states. They have the lawmaking power and have therefore the most power. Article 2 is the president. He deals with a lot of foreign affairs. He has the second most power. Article 3 is the courts. Hamilton said they are the weakest of all the departments, right? Not anymore. But we're talking about the structure, the constitutional structure of the government, all right? First of all, I want to read to you from Emer de Vattel, who, as you know, is on the Founders Recipe list, very influential on our founding fathers. He explained to us in his book, The Law of Nations, how to interpret contracts, which our Constitution is, right? How do you interpret the terms in a contract? All right, so let's start at the beginning. The general rule, right? This is Law of Nations, Book 2, Chapter 17, Section 270, on the general interpretation. The sole object of lawful interpretation of a deed ought to be the discovery of the thoughts of the author or authors of that deed. Whenever we meet with any obscurity in it, we are to consider what probably were the ideas of those who drew it up and to interpret it accordingly. Not what some judge in 2019 or 2020 thinks. Not what some senator thinks. Not what somebody on television thinks. We are to find out what the people who drew it up thought those words meant and interpret it accordingly. That's rule number 1. So, rule number 2. The usage we speak of In the interpretation, so this is section 271. In the interpretation, we ought not to deviate from the common use of the language unless we have a very strong reason for it. Now, common use of the language today, common use of language in 1789, which should we do? Thank you, Mr. Vottle. The usage we speak of here is that of the time when the treaty or whatever kind of deed was drawn up and concluded. When, therefore, an ancient deed is to be interpreted, we should be acquainted with the common use of the terms at the time when it was written. And that knowledge is to be acquired from deeds of the same period, from contemporary writers, by diligently comparing them with each other. This is the only source from which to derive any information that can be depended on. That seems pretty cut and dry, guys. If you want to know what these words mean, you interpret them in the plain usage. You interpret them according to what the authors believed those words to mean. The plain usage, how do you find out what the usage was? What was the usage at the time the document was written? How do you find out? Well, you compare it to other documents written at the time, other writers who wrote at the time. How did they use the word? There we go. Very simply. So let's do this, right? So let's break down a little bit of Article 1. We'll start with the beginning. All legislative powers. The word all means all. It doesn't mean some, it doesn't mean most, it means all. All legislative powers, all laws for the United States come from Congress. Executive orders are not laws. Because if they intended that, they wouldn't have said all legislative powers are vested in Congress. They would have said some are in Congress and some are in the executive. They didn't say that. All lawmaking power is in Congress. Executive orders, not a law. What did Alexander Hamilton say about that? It's an act of usurpation and deserves to be treated as such. All. Supreme Court opinions, not law. 580-year-olds in black robes cannot dictate to 330 million of us what the law is. They can tell us what their opinion is. That doesn't make it the law. Now, this isn't my opinion. Look at Article 6 of the Constitution, where the framers list the supreme law of the land. The Constitution, laws of the United States made in pursuance thereof, made following the Constitution, constitutionally valid laws, and treaties. No mention of Supreme Court decisions. If they would have expected us to follow them, they would have added that in Article 6. They didn't. Laws, all. The first word of Article 1, all of them. All laws are made by Congress. All right, all legislative. Legislative, what does that mean? It's Latin for lawmaking. Simple as that, okay? All lawmaking powers, therefore refer to what I said, all lawmaking. Every law that's valid in the United States from the federal government comes from Congress, period. I don't care if you like the president, if he's your favorite tyrant, if you voted for the tyrant, if you like him, doesn't matter. He cannot make law. The president cannot sign a letter saying a bump stock is a machine gun and that makes it so and that makes it the law. No. A president cannot sign a letter saying we're going to decide who it is safe can own a gun or not. That's not law. Americans shouldn't obey such things, not even ones who support the president. Your patriotism should be to your patria, to your forefathers, to the document that they gave us. All right, legislative, lawmaking powers, makes sense. Herein. Now, herein, what does that mean? If something is in, there is something that is out, right? If the founding fathers had meant to say, all the laws that will ever be made that are valid in the United States are made in Congress, they would have said, all legislative powers are granted to Congress. They didn't say that. All legislative powers herein granted, meaning there are lots of legislative powers that are here out, meaning they're not listed in here. Why? Because they are retained by the states. As our friend Mr. Madison said in Federalist 45, the powers of the states are numerous and indefinite. The powers of the federal government are few and defined. So the powers, the lawmaking power of Congress herein granted in the four corners of that document. Because outside of that four corners, Congress has no authority, but the states have numerous and indefinite powers. You got it? Federalist 45 for those of you scoring at home. Okay? All right. Herein. Next. Granted. Now, do you remember what they said? What Vattel said? You go to the people who wrote at the time. Well, you look at the 1786 dictionary, the 1786 edition of Dr. Johnson's dictionary. Let's look at the definition of granted. Granted is, in the law, a gift such as a thing as can aptly be passed or conveyed, as a gift in writing of such a thing as cannot be passed or conveyed by word, as cannot be given but by deed. In other words, if it's not written in this document, Congress does not have that power. Granted. It means, it's not just a word they use. They didn't look up the source and say, hey, we want to give Congress power. Let's make the Constitution sound fancy. Look up a synonym. James, look up a synonym for give. And he's like, granted, put granted. Yeah, that'll make us look smart. Let's grant Congress power. No. Every word means something in here. All legislative powers herein granted. Must look at the definition in the law. It must be written down. Cannot be in word. If it's not in that Constitution, Congress does not have that power. No matter how good it is, how noble it is, how charitable it is, how much we think it would help us, doesn't matter. I defy you to find health care. I defy you to find education in the list of powers of Congress. Granted. If it ain't listed, you can't do it. Granted is a word with a meaning in the law. Remember what Vattel said. Look at the words. What did they mean at the time? Herein, granted. They're written down or they don't exist. Period. All right. Vested, meaning what? Meaning that this power shall be given. You notice they say shall be vested, not are vested. Did you notice that? Shall be vested. That's like saying, you will possess this power. You will possess this. This power will be yours. But something has to happen first. In this case, why didn't, when the men passed the Constitution, when they approved it in September of 1787, why weren't there elections, and why didn't we have congressmen, and why didn't they have this lawmaking power for the United States? Because the states had to approve it. They had to ratify it. They had to agree to join this union. And was that all or nothing? No. What does the Constitution say? 9. When 9 of you join, we're a thing. The other 4 of you remain independent republics. Right? You do what you want. You're not part of this union. That doesn't mean anything for you. You're still a republic. You existed before the union. You'll exist afterward. Right? You understand? So, vested. Congress was only going to get this power that's being granted, not given, granted, must be written down. Samuel Johnson's dictionary. I'll drop the link in the show notes. Must be written down. Congress, this will vest in Congress when something happens. And that something happens is when you join the union, if you do. Okay? Then you'll have that power. All right. Because if Rhode Island didn't join the union, but the other 12 did, would Congress have had any power over Rhode Island? That doesn't even make sense. No one would argue that, well, Rhode Island, look, you're small. We know you didn't vote to join the union, but Congress has authority, lawmaking power. Right. Lawmaking power granted therein. We aren't therein, we're there out. Right? Simple as that, right? You're not going to argue that your neighbor doesn't have the authority to set a bedtime for his kids just because you do. I guarantee you, if I went next door and told my neighbor, hey, I know that you have a child, and I think that child should go to bed at 9. It's a really good hour. He'll get some good sleep. He'll do better in school. He'll be brighter. He'll be happier. He should go to bed at 9. Do you think that dude's going to put his kid to bed at 9? How long is it going to take him to get off the floor after he falls down laughing? No authority, right? It's simple in person. Why do we lose our minds when it comes to government? All right? Vested. If you join, then we possess this power that herein we have been granted 4 corners. All right. The big one. Are you ready? All right. Congress. Now, we were British, right? We declared our independence from Great Britain. We were colonies of Great Britain. Our government, for the most part, is fashioned after the government of Great Britain. What is the lawmaking body of Great Britain called? Parliament. So, why didn't the Founding Fathers, men who were so particular about using words like granted and vested, why didn't they just call our lawmaking body Parliament? They knew the word, obviously. Why didn't they do that? Because it wasn't meant to be a parliament. Let's look up Congress, shall we? In Mr. Johnson's dictionary of 1786, look at definition number 2. An appointed meeting for settlement of affairs between different nations. What? They called it Congress, not Parliament, on purpose. That is a truth atom bomb that just dropped on you. Don't tell me that he didn't know the word Parliament. He didn't know that Parliament made laws for England. That he didn't know we were English. That he didn't know his BFF here declared independence from England. If we intended to make our lawmaking body Parliament, we would have called it Parliament. We did not. In a Congress, an appointed meeting for settlement affairs between different nations? We're not one nation? What? That's right, boys and girls. We're not. We're a confederation of independent republics. That's why the Constitution guarantees to every state a Republican, not that kind of Republican, Republican, small r, form of government. No consolidation. Ask him, Was it meant to be consolidated? No way, Joey. I told them never consolidated. Thanks, little Jimmy. Congress. Now, all right, that's fine. But let's remember what Vattel also said. Writers who wrote at the time, so we got Johnson's dictionary. Let's look at Edmund Burke describing the difference between Parliament and Congress in 1774. Right? Look at what he says here. This should blow your mind. So, I'll give you a little background. He's in Bristol, England, and the people of Bristol are telling him, "Oi, Mr. Burke, we're not being represented in Parliament. Our city, we're not being represented. Parliament's doing things that we don't like. We want Bristol's interests to be represented in Parliament." And he's like, yeah, that's not what Parliament is. Let us read, shall we? Parliament is not. Now, he's going to do it backwards, so you got to think. Parliament is not a congress of ambassadors from different and hostile interests, which interests each must maintain as an agent and advocate against other agents and advocates. But Parliament is a deliberative assembly of one nation with one interest, that of the whole, where not local purposes, not local prejudices ought to guide, but the general good resulting from the general reason of the whole. What? Congress is ambassadors from different and hostile local interests coming together to do things that concern all of them, but each of them doing what? Acting as an agent and advocate for the people who elected them, their ambassador from their little area. He says, that is Congress. We don't have a Congress, he says. We have Parliament. There is nobody representing Bristol, he says. Parliament represents one nation. Parliament represents the whole of Great Britain. Do you understand? If they intended us to be one nation and have one set of laws that govern a territory as expansive and as different as Maine and Arizona, they would have written that. They didn't. So that's just a quick lesson for you guys. Look at the words in the very first sentence of the Constitution. All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested, if it happens, in a Congress, not a Parliament. Congress, a meeting of ambassadors from local areas, all acting as agents of their local areas. Thank you guys. Appreciate you tuning in. Spread the word.